Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Rubel from Quilty Zest, and tonight in our Facebook Live in the ThermOWeb Craft Room page, I'm going to be talking about my Strippy Improv patterns for spring. I'm not going to get started quite yet because we want to give people some time to get on, but I'm excited for what I have to show you tonight. I've got a project for each of the spring months, March, April, and May, that I'll be showing you both scrappy versions of the blocks that I've made and then the finished projects done in Shadow Blush, a basics collection from Benartex. So tonight I'll be showing you, in addition to the projects, a couple tips and tricks for making these blocks. And because it is March 14th, which means that St. Patrick's Day is right around the corner, we're going to have a little bit of St. Patrick's Day leprechaun fun as well. So I'll get started with that after we've got given people a chance to come up on our Facebook Live and join us here. So I don't know about where you live, but where I am, we've got weather that's going all over the place, pretty typical of March. I'm in Michigan, and in the past week, we've had temperatures in the 30s and temperatures in the high 70s. A little different from the week before when we had that temperature range within a 12-hour period. So at least these were different days. But we are getting ready for spring and flower planting and short sleeve weather. And in my case, all of the sports that my three boys will be doing. So I'm very excited for spring, and making some spring projects was a great way to sort of get me in the mood for all of the fun things that are happening over the next couple of months. So I see Dawn has joined. Fantastic. But we'll just wait another minute or two and see if anyone else shows up, and then I will get started on my little show and tell and some of the demos that I'm going to do for you. But like I said at the beginning, because we are so close to St. Patrick's Day, the leprechaun magic, I think, has joined us for tonight. So I'm going to lean full into that. And over the course of this Facebook Live, I'm going to show you 3 different magic tricks. 2 of them are sewing related to my project, and the third one is just for fun, something that happens at my house every year, or at least has in the past. My kids might be getting a little bit too old for it. Oh, I see Julia has joined us as well. Hi, Julia. And so because of St. Patrick's Day, I pulled out my rainbow pillow. This was a tutorial that I did on the ThermOWeb blog, I think 2 years ago, maybe. But if you search my name on the blog, you can find this rainbow pillow. It's one of my favorites. I love the pom-pom fringe along the bottom. And actually, you'll see some of these little pom-poms later tonight. But it's a raw edge applique pillow in a rainbow shape. So I figured if there was going to be leprechaun magic tonight, that we also needed to have a rainbow for that. So I decided to pull out my rainbow pillow. Okay, so I think it is time for our first magic trick. And I'm going to start out. I'm a little thirsty tonight, so I'm going to pour myself a glass of water. The leprechauns have visited us, and my clear water turned green as I poured it into my cup. It tastes a little minty since it came from the leprechauns. So this is a trick that I would do for my kids every year, and if you want to know the secret behind it, you put a little food coloring in the bottom of the cup, and then when you're pouring, you put your hand over the bottom of the cup so the food coloring doesn't show, and you pour in clear water, apple juice, lemonade, whatever, and as the water hits the food coloring, it turns it green. So if you've got kids at home and want to have a little St. Patrick's Day trick, give them a green beverage to drink on Sunday morning. Oops. Okay, so with that St. Patrick's Day themed magic trick. We're going to move on to Strippy Improv. And with March being the month of St. Patrick's Day, I of course couldn't resist creating shamrocks. So the project calls for 4 shamrocks, and I did a set using scraps first. And you can see I've got a kind of a medium green background for these, and that's so that my reverse applique doesn't show through all the way. And I'll talk a little bit about that technique, but the key for these projects is to have a background that's in the medium or the dark family. So I went with a medium green so that I could use these variety of scraps. And if you are going to go scrappy, you'll notice that all of my scraps are primarily green and really read as green. There aren't any that are multicolor, and that means that the farther away you get, it just looks like a green shamrock, and then when it gets closer, you can appreciate all of the scrappiness that is going on. So let me talk a little bit about this technique. It combines Strippy Improv piecing and also reverse applique. And so what I start out by doing is choosing my strips, and I sew them onto a muslin backing. And I will angle the strips as I sew them on, which is where the Strippy Improv part comes from. And then I trace my shamrock shape onto HeatnBond Lite fusible adhesive, and then I put it on the back of my green square. And then I do reverse applique by fusing the cutout shape onto my background. So instead of having the applique shape be on top, it's actually behind the background, and that's why it's called reverse applique. So all of the projects I'm showing you tonight use that technique, just with different shapes and different styles and that type of thing. And like I said, the product that I use for that is this HeatnBond Lite sewable fusible adhesive. And I love it for a few reasons. This actually is how I got involved with ThermOWeb, as I started using their product and sent an email telling them how much I liked it. And then it just went from there. But what I like about it is that it's really easy to peel off the paper after you've cut your shape out. You don't have to worry about fraying your applique shape. And that the adhesive that gets left behind is very shiny, and so it's very easy to see where it is and where it is not. So this is my go-to for making the Strippy Improv applique blocks. And then, of course, also the pressing sheets, because anytime that I'm using the HeatnBond Lite, I use a pressing sheet to make sure I don't end up with any of that sticky adhesive on my iron, which is something I've definitely done in the past. But by using one of these pressing sheets, that is not an issue. And so now I'm going to show you the finished project. It is a little table topper. It's 4 shamrock blocks and then 4 blocks that sort of create an iris chain look. And I still went with a scrappy look, but using these shadow blush fabrics from Benartex. They've got subtle shaded texture to them. And I picked 5 different greens to work with for the squares and the shamrocks. And then I used a medium green for the block background, and then this lighter green for the border, and then just a solid white. So you can see this quilt combines reverse applique in the Strippy Improv as well as just regular traditional piecing. And then I quilted it with a crosshatch design. Now I'm going to come a little closer with this so that you can see the stitching that I did around the shamrocks. On this particular one, I used a zigzag stitch. And I want to show you that because I use different stitches on different projects, and I'll explain why I use different ones. And the reason for that is when they're a larger shape that's easier to trace around, like this shamrock, or easier to follow the line of, I should say, I will use a zigzag stitch because I know that I am capable of following that line and making sure my zigzag covers that raw edge. If I have a shape that's got more ins and outs and is a little fussier, a lot of times I will do a straight stitch around that because it's not as easy for me to maneuver that zigzag in and out. The other thing I also consider when I'm choosing my stitches is how the piece is going to be used. Now this particular one as a table topper is likely to get washed because it will be on a table and it might get spilled on. And so the more something that is going to be handled and washed, I want to have a little bit more of a secure stitch on it as it gets used and used. If it was something where it was a wall hanging where it wouldn't be handled or used as much, a straight stitch is a great option for that. Oh, the one other thing I wanted to talk about with this quilt is this one is about 29 inches wide, and for the batting for that, I used fusible fleece from ThermOWeb. And what you may not know, because I didn't know for a while, is you can get fusible fleece in these handy packs that are 20 inches by 1 yard. And that's great when you have a smaller project, but you can also get fusible fleece by on a bolt. And the bolt is a wider piece, more like traditional fabric. I think it's 45, 44 maybe, but it's much wider than 20. So I was able to use all one piece off of the bolt for this rather than having to sort of piece two of the pieces from the package together. So that bolt is a nice thing to know about, and I just wanted to mention it in case other people were not aware of it like me. So moving on from March, our next project is for April, and I went with bunnies. And so these remind me of Peeps, and I kind of chose colors for them that to me were Peep-like, pastel colors. And this is my scrappy version. And you can see I picked a background color that would allow the pink, yellow, and lavender bunnies to pop off of it. And then for the fabrics that I used, I picked ones that blended well together. So you really get a look that is cohesive in terms of all the pinks, all the yellows, and all of the lavenders. And I just love these little folded ears on the bunnies. Now this would be really cute as a mini quilt just on its own, either with borders or just quilting it and putting a binding on it. But I decided to go a slightly different route, and I made it into a basket, a fabric basket like this. And so you can see for the bunnies, I went with pink, yellow, and blue. And I've got a little more contrast in the colors that I used, which makes it a little more textured, almost gives it a little bit of a stripe effect. And you're going to see that in the next project as well. And so I'm just pointing out to you all the different color schemes that you can use and the values of your palette and the different looks that you can create. Now, to give this basket the body that it has so it can stand up on its own, I used a combination of fusible fleece and of the Craft Extra Firm fusible interfacing. And by using these two products together, I have something that has body to it, but it also has a little softness to it with the fusible fleece. And I really like that combination of the two. And now one of the other tips I wanted to tell you is I am not by nature a patient person. You think having three boys and who are now getting into their teen and tween ages that I would have learned patience by now, but it hasn't really happened. And so a lot of times I find when I'm adhering fusible fleece or interfacing or something to a larger piece of fabric, like I did for this project, I get impatient. And I have learned that with this, it pays to be patient, because if you just, kind of whip your iron across and don't spend a lot of time in each spot, it's not going to stick well. So it really pays to follow the instructions on the packaging and take that extra time. Maybe put on a podcast or a Netflix show and do that while you're fusing. But if you follow the instructions, you will get a quality fuse that will help you finish your project in a much more pleasant way than fighting with all the layers coming apart. So definitely be patient when you use that interfacing so that it can do for you all the things that it is able to do. And that's another great place to use the pressing sheet as well as you're putting those layers together. Now, my one question about this that I hadn't decided on yet, so I decided I would take a little survey tonight, and I'm trying to decide if I should put little handles on the side, on each side of the bag. So if you're watching this and you can leave me a comment and say, yes, I think handles are a great idea, or no, I think it's fine like it is, I would appreciate it because I wasn't able to decide. So I decided I would leave it up to the crowd tonight and see what you all think. And then the other thing, I wanted to give you a close-up of the bunnies. And you can see this is a project where, and I used a matching color thread so that it's hard to see, but where I just did a straight stitch around the bunnies. Because with all of the ins and outs and tiny details, and these bunnies are not very tall, they're about 4 inches, but I didn't think that I could do it justice with a zigzag stitch. So I decided that I was going to do a straight stitch on this as well. And if you're not confident in your straight stitch, following a shape skills, you can definitely go real slow. And also, like I did, choose a thread color that matches your fabric, because then it won't show as much. If you are confident in your skills, you can play around with different color threads so you can kind of use that as an accent to the project instead of having it blend. The other thing, and I forgot to pull it out to show, when you are doing decorative stitching on your applique, whether it's straight stitch or zigzag, you want to find an open toe foot for your machine. I've got 2 different ones. This really wide one is the one I like. And the advantage to that is when you're doing your stitch, you can see exactly where you are. So you can see that you've got the needle right next to the edge of the bunny there, so that your stitch goes exactly where you want it to, as opposed to here's my regular foot and I've got all of this metal and plastic in the way. So you can see it's a lot easier to see where I'm headed. So I definitely recommend using that kind of foot. And then my second magic trick, which I had a second camera set up tonight and it was misbehaving, so we're going the old tech version, but I am going to use fabric fuse here to add these cute little pom-poms to the bunnies for tails. I'm ultimately going to put these on the basket as well, but I need to lay the basket on its side to do that. And I decided that for the camera it would be easier to do it on a flat piece of fabric. So I'm going to do it on this sample. So I just put a little bit of fabric fuse on the bunny itself, and now I'm adding these little round balls for tails, and I think it's going to be really cute. So I'm going to let those dry nice and flat. I'm going to move it off to the side, but we now have tails on our bunnies. Magic trick number 2. And then I'm going to put this back up. Okay, and now we're moving on to our third project for May, which is flowers. So I did 2 different flower blocks. I did tulips, and then I did a daisy. And these are the scrappy versions that I made with prints from my stash. And you can see on the orange and the pink, I have a variety of shades. So you get more of that textured stripy look like I was talking about. And then with the whites, I use several white on whites. And so that is much more all the same color, so it doesn't have quite the same effect. And on these ones, I stitched around the edge of the flower with a straight stitch. And you'll see on the other version, I did zigzag. Now, what's different about this project is I combined reverse applique with traditional applique. So the flower itself is reverse applique, and then the leaves and stem, and for the daisy, the center, is traditional applique. So you can use reverse and traditional applique together, no problem. So I've got a little, actually I'll show you the other project first. So this is the version I did in Shadow Blush. I gotta get it in front of the, there we go. It's 2 tulips and a daisy. And I used a bunch of jewel tones and kind of bright springy colors for it. And you can see the pinks I used for the tulip, again, create that sort of striped effect because there's a lighter and a darker. But I used two different purples or magentas for the daisy, but they're very close in color. So until you get really close, you can't tell that it is done with Strippy Improv. And then I had a lot of fun quilting this one with texture and all different colors of thread. Okay, so my third magic trick, I'm going to put the camera back down, is I'm going to show you how one of these blocks come together and also give you two more tips. So I've got my tulip shape fused onto the back of my background piece, and you can see I started cutting it out. Now I have a really bad habit of cutting on my lap, and I'll just sit back here and do this. And when you do that, you can do two things. One, you can cut through your pants, which I have done before. And two, especially when you're cutting out of a larger piece and you're doing reverse applique, so you're keeping this outside part and getting rid of the inside part. That's a little different. And it's very easy for a piece of your outer edge to get tucked underneath and you accidentally cut it where you don't want to. So the best way to cut this is to lay it flat on a surface instead of trying to cut it up in the air, and then do your cutting that way, because then you can see all four corners of your background and you know that you're not accidentally cutting something that you shouldn't, because you've got a cutting mat underneath and those don't cut with scissors. So now I've got my tulip cut out. And then my other tip for you for making the stems, so the stems for this particular project or any applique project with straight pieces, it's just a straight piece. So rather than trying to trace it perfectly and cut it perfectly with the scissors, what I do is I measure what the finished piece should be, and then I take my ruler and I just cut with the ruler to the specific size that I need. And I know, because I'm using a ruler and a rotary cutter, that my piece will be straight and I don't have to worry about how I trace it. So when you're cutting straight pieces, that's an easier way to go. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I made this Strippy Improv piece earlier, and I'm going to lay that down, and I'm going to peel the paper off the back of my tulip, and I'm going to lay this on top. And now you'll see as I lay it, I can either slide it down or I can slide it up to kind of get the color placement that I want. And then I'm going to take my little iron here and I'm going to press it down. And this is a time when you're pressing, you want to make very sure that you're just putting it down and lifting it up and not rubbing it back and forth. I tend to be bad about that when I'm piecing, but for applique, when you're using fusible adhesive, you want to make sure you're just going up and down. So I'm going to do that to get it down, and you'll need to move around a bit to make sure that you get all of the edges down. And like I said with the interfacing, have patience and do it for enough time instead of getting impatient and trying to have it done early. Okay. So I think I've got that down. And now I'm going to add in my stem, which is, like I said, traditional applique, not reverse applique like the background. And then I've got 2 leaves to put on, a smaller one, which goes on this side. And then I love the shape of tulip leaves. Like they're so distinctive that you know when you see one exactly what it is. So once I get those 3 pieces in their correct spot, then I'm going to do the same thing and fuse them down. And when they're fused, I will have transformed this plain blue piece of fabric into a tulip block. And I don't know if you follow special days of the year, but yesterday or Tuesday, I think Tuesday was Plant a Flower Day. And so I actually made one of my samples on Tuesday, so I was planting my own kind of flower. And then now tonight I'm showing you how to plant a flower again. So that is how the tulip block goes together. Okay, I will come up here and so those are, let me get that straight. Those are my 3 projects for the Year of Strippy Improv spring pattern. And that pattern will be available next week. And it will be available in my Etsy shop. And if you're looking to follow me or to find that pattern, my pattern writing company name is Quilty Zest. So you can find my website at quiltyzest.com. And I also have an Etsy shop, Quilty Zest, and Instagram as well. So you can find me those places to find information about the pattern. I'm guessing you also may hear about it through ThermOWeb as well, since they were so kind to let me come on tonight and talk about it. So the pattern will be available. And then there will also be kits being offered by my local quilt shop, which is so fabulous in Portage, Michigan. And I was over there yesterday showing them the different fabrics that I'd used for each of those projects. And so after the pattern goes live, they will have kits available. So if you want to make the project in the same shadow blush fabrics that I used from Benartex, they'll be able to help you out with that. So I'll have information about all of that next week on my blog and on Instagram if you want to look for it there. I also have a newsletter. And like I said, I imagine you'll hear a little bit about this through ThermOWeb as well, since they've been wonderful in providing me in the products that I use to make this technique come to life. And so that is the end of my little Facebook Live tonight. I hope you enjoyed seeing my shamrocks, the cute little bunnies, and my flowers, as well as my 3 magic tricks. And don't forget the green water for Sunday. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you, ThermOWeb, for having me. It was a lot of fun to get to talk about these tonight, and I'm always happy to talk about quilting for probably longer than I should. So thank you, and have a great night.